good feeling that I got the same clothes on I had on yesterday, and some of you have the same clothes on you had on. I got a better excuse than you, but well, after looking at Valpo, which we did a lot last night, and looking at the field and looking at the situation and how many games we've played and what we've done against ranked teams, against teams that we're going to have to face in this tournament, I look at it this way. I'm glad to be at the Palace. Palace has been good to us. Not that it matters, but I think there's a comforting thought that at least we've won our share of games at the Palace over the years. And I think that's going to be very important. I think the most important thing, though, is Valpo is a very, very good team. They got a great shooter in Brokoff. I mean, he is a big-time player. He's one of the leaders in three-point shooting in the country. He's one of the leading free throw shooters in the country. But I think of all the things that concern me about him, they're well coached. He's been part of a legacy there with his dad. They've won a lot of games, especially 16 of their last 18. When you look at that, that's scary. But I think the number one issue we have with them is this is a complete senior-laden team with 5 starters, as I said last night, all seniors, and 2 of them fifth-year seniors. And experience and the end of the line, I think, helps you play at a different level. So that's the bad news for us. The good news for us is I think our guys are excited to play. And we had a little meeting last night, looked at a little film with them, and I think they're going to be ready to play. And we think we have to really stop their offense. They shoot 50% of the field, almost 40 from the 3 and 74 from the line. So it is a very efficient team, efficient offense, and trying to get a gauge on some teams they've played is a little harder, but at the same time, they played some quality people on the road and lost a few of those games, but showed up, and I mean showed up big time. So I'll take the questions you have instead of me telling you what I think.
Tom, how much has how you prepare for these first 2 games changed over the years in terms of like the moment you find out who you're playing Sunday to the days leading up to the game? How much has that changed? How much do you think you have?
Well, my first couple of years, I just worried about that one team and made sure my team worried about that one team. Now I make sure my team worries about the one team, and I worry about the whole weekend. At least my staff does. I think, as you got better in the tournament, you realize winning the game, getting in is not where you have the parade anymore, and then winning a game isn't where you have the parade anymore. And so I stole stuff from other guys that have been successful and said, you got to win the weekend. And so, I got different staff are preparing differently. Jordan Ott is working 24/7 to get all the stuff out there on and now we have a unique thing too. We have a play-in game in our kind of spot. So we won't do much on that play-in team until after Tuesday night. And we won't prepare necessarily a lot different. What you do is if somebody in your bracket in this weekend is pressing more, you might work on presses within. If somebody is zoning more, you might work on a little more zone offense than you normally would. But for the most part, for us, in our practice sessions, it's going to be 98% on Valparaiso.
Tom, I was talking to Brandon this morning over in Budapest, and I asked him about, everyone talks about your success, NCAA success, and I said, what do you do differently? And he said he thinks that what you do differently is absolutely nothing. You are as intense for the preseason exhibitions as you are for the tournament, and he thinks that's what makes you successful, is the entire season is a tournament. I've never heard that put into perspective like that. Could you expound on that, please?
Well, I'm hoping that's a big positive, and I think, I think I heard it last night on one of the shows I was watching when I finally got home. I think it was Jay Williams that said the advantage to playing tough teams and being at that high intensity level almost all the time, is that becomes part of your fiber, part of who you are, part of who your team is. And I think that is what helps you. You know, it's repetition, it's the same. I think if you try to be phony or something different, it hurts you. And so maybe I didn't realize that, but being a jerk when we got beat by Grand Valley is just as good as being a jerk when we got beat by Ohio State. And so I'm consistent. I'm very consistent.
Coach, earlier in the season in the non-conference games, when you played teams that were a little smaller along the front line, they seemed to jam up the middle and make it a little harder for your inside-out game. How do you prepare for a team maybe a little smaller, a little quicker in the lane?
Well, that we are going to have to do, and take advantage of what they give us and then try to push on them what we want to get too. I mean, there's a little bit of both in there, but it is a different team because they have a four-man that at first I thought was like Thomas from Ohio State, but he puts it on the floor and moves a lot differently. Thomas doesn't do those things. This kid is actually more effective in that way, and yet he scores and shoots it at a very high level. So we're going to have to do some things defensively a little different, and offensively, you know, that's the part that we're still looking at right now, how much they zone, how much they really trap. They do some definite trapping on the post, and I'm sure they'll trap us, and it's a pretty aggressive trap, and yet we've played some teams that have done that. I go back to a Boise, so at least been there, done that before, and we'll look at a little film of that and see how we did it. But we're definitely still going to have to play inside out. We're just a better shooting team when we do. We're get to the free throw line more when we do, and we're, I think, more successful when we do.
Yeah, kind of the same stuff. Some people call it like a matchup zone they do. Do you expect them to do that a lot? And then can Adrian Payne chase Brokoff around because he is more like a guard?
Those are some of the things Adrian's going to have to do a good job in practice. What really impressed me in the last game against Ohio State is they did bring Thomas off some doubles in that when he wasn't getting his normal shot. Adrian actually did a great job. But it is harder, you know, getting over ball screens, although they don't use Brokoff in that respect as much. They bring him off more stagger screens and single screens and try to put him in different spots. They move him all over, and that's going to be harder for him. But we also have Brandon that can play, you know, 3 and 4, and you might see, you know, some of that too. He's not a guy that posts you up as much as he is moving around. So it's going to be a tougher matchup for AP, but I think one AP can handle. You know, it's funny. I think every year everybody's going to zone us. And every time someone's zoned us, we've picked it apart. I mean, we've had very little problem against zones now, and sometimes with not as good as shooting teams. So we haven't been zoned that much. I would expect we would some, but I'm going to have to watch more film, meaning more numbers of games to see who they did it against and who they didn't do it against, because I don't think when you're them you're going to change up either. I mean, they've just won 16 out of 18 games. It's not like, you know, they don't know how to play, and their system has worked pretty good for them.
Tom, you've talked a lot about having the pieces to do something with this group, and also equally the questions about leadership and focus and those sort of things. How difficult is it to have the pieces, and how much would that make not making a run sort of a shame for this group, do you think?
Well, you know, it's like this year. I mean, we had the pieces, but other teams have pieces too. And there are some other good teams out there. And, you know, we've talked a lot about our pieces have been a little bit mixed up for various reasons. Dawson's, Trice's, Gary Harris is a big one. Him and Dawson are probably the biggest two. But that plays a part in it too. So disappointing. I think we're good enough to make a run. There's good enough teams to beat us. I think we're exactly what I said all year. We're, I think, a pretty good team and maybe a great team if we get more than 2 guys to play well at the same time. And we have struggled to do that for a variety of reasons. Some our own self-inflicted, and some that we don't have control of. So I'm always disappointed if we don't make a good run in the tournament. I think this team is good enough to make a good run in the tournament. I think last year's team was. I was disappointed in the loss we had then. I think we got a similar team as last year. I mean, last year we became a 1 seed because we won the tournament. The way everything worked out, I didn't think so going in, but we might have been close to a 1 seed if we would have won it, or definitely one of the highest 2 seeds. So we're in a similar position we were in last year, and we got a similar team that we didn't just beat anybody by out-talenting them. I think if we were totally healthy with Dawson and Harris, I think we are more talented than last year's team. But we're not in that position, and we don't have that leader in Day-Day. So we got some pluses on one side, we got some minuses on the other. And yet I will be very disappointed if we don't make a run. I really will.
Tom, you talked throughout the season about the different styles of play you've gone against and how that could help you. Does this style of play that Valparaiso have compare to anyone you've seen? And how do you see it matching up or affecting Nixon Payne, both offensively and defensively? Could they potentially not be together as frequently?
There's a potential for that. Yesterday, I don't know if any of you watched the Ohio State game, but they played Thomas at center a lot of the time in the last 10 minutes of that game. And, you got to do what you got to do, whatever works. I mean, as much problems as we have on one side, they're going to have problems on the other side. But, I said a Boise team, very well coached team that can shoot the ball at 4 positions. This one's a little different, that they probably have a point guard, and their point guard was good, but this one's more of a penetrating point guard. That was more of a scoring point guard. I'm sure there's other teams as I go through it, but as far as individual players, this creates the same issues as a Michigan would or a Indiana would, with a guy at the 4 that can score, that can shoot it, that can go a little bit inside and outside. So, we've played when White plays at the 4 for Iowa. We've done that. So I don't know if it's that much different. I just think they have experience, boy. I mean, we've not played against anybody that started 5 seniors, ever, that I can remember. This is unique.
Tom, with all the parity we talk about in college basketball, and does that change at all how many teams you think can make the Final Four and what it takes to get there? Like, there aren't those unbelievable power teams standing in the way, but yet there's so many teams that think they can get there. Now, does that change expectations, do you think, of getting to the Final Four?
Not for our fans. I don't think it does, but I think realistically this year, you could look at the glass half full or half empty. You could say, hey, we have just as good a chance as anybody, and I'd believe you every minute of every day. And yet there's more landmines because everybody's pretty similar. And if there's ever a time when you talk about this tournament, I try to preach from day one, even when we go through that gauntlet of things, of 5 or 6 games in a row. To get to a Final Four, you got to be pretty peak at all 4 games now. Definitely 3 out of the 4 you got to be, but probably all 4 now. The way it's changed, and I know the disadvantage of being a 1 seed right now. There's going to be a 16 that beats a 1. It's going to happen. I mean, it's just going to happen. And I think there's almost getting to be pressure on that now. So I think, in all honesty, that there are a lot of teams that could get there this year. I really do believe that. And I do think, we're one of, but I can think of 6 other Big Ten schools. That's the scary part, that I think legitimately could get there. I can think of 5 or 6 Big East schools that could legitimately get there. And yet you look at how crazy it was. Miami was a lock 1. They end up at 2. Duke was working their way into a lock 1. They end up at 2. Ohio State maybe was a 3, they end up a 2. You know, it's everybody's bunched in there, and we've played 11, I think it was, the top 5 seeds. We've played 11 games against those teams, so we're going to be prepared for just about anybody. The matchups do become an issue, though. You could have played the world, and certain teams might match up a little different with you than others. I mean, in this thing here, we're going to play against all the seniors and a 4-man that can really do some things. Then if you win that game, who knows who you play. If the brackets went the same, you're going to play against a Memphis team who is athletic as all get out, to be a completely different kind of team. That's where I hope the experience that we've had in the Big Ten and the non-conference helps us as we hopefully work our way through the tournament.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Big Ten this year more than ever. Do you think there's pressure, so to speak, on Big Ten teams to prove in the tournament what they proved in the regular season?
Yeah, my man Charles Barkley, he ripped us. You know, he said that the Mountain West. So I had a message to Steve Smith to ask Charles where Auburn is in this tournament. But you know, there is, because everybody's going to put on it. If you fail, you know, your league's not as good. I've said this 100 times, and I believe it. You know, the Big Ten ACC challenge, it doesn't mean somebody's got a better shot at going to the Final Four, whoever wins that, in my mind, because it all comes down to matchups. But yeah, I think there's pressure on us. I mean, but I think the one thing we've done this year, we've kind of answered the bell from the beginning of the year when we were picked there till the end. You look at Indiana, you looked at Michigan most of the year, you look at, you know, us and Ohio State. We all stayed, 2 of those teams stayed in that top 5, 6, 7. 2 other of us stayed in the top 13 and down. So we weren't just a flash in the pan. You know, we all stayed there, and the league in general, I think, stayed there. You know, 1 or 2 teams went a little up, 1 or 2 teams went a little down, but there were 6 or 7 teams that stayed pretty solid all year round, and that's gonna bring some pressure. But that's why I'm hoping we get more than 1 team to a Final Four.
Tom, in your quest to win another title, how much does it help that you have support from guys like Magic and Mateen and your bosses, Mark and Luana? How much does that help you day to day, year to year, do your job and, you know, kind of chase that
dream? Yeah. You know, it helps a lot. You know, I mean, Steve was on last night, and Mateen was on the CBS college last night, and you know, Charlie was here for the selection, and I talked to Irvin's brother a couple days ago, and all those things, you know, mean the world to me. I hope it means the world to the players. It means that there's excitement. It means that we've sustained something for now 16 straight years. I mean, that is, when you look at it compared to some other programs, that is something that I'm damn proud of, and I think those guys are proud of. And those guys helped build it, and we're just continually to build onto it. But the foundation they built, the rest of it we're going to keep trying to add on. And so with Mark Hollis, with Luana Simon, you know, Joe Ferguson was there last night. So when you got your board, when you got your president, when you got your AD, and you got your former players, for a coach, it doesn't get any better than that. It makes it not only you feel good about trying to accomplish it, but for me, it makes me want to accomplish it even more so that they can share in it.
I'll buy you a popsicle.
Baseball question?
No, I'll buy you a popsicle, though, if a 16 ever beats a 1. But all the others are fairly tedious, and I'm getting to the parity thing. When you coaches say, as you said last night, the toughest thing to do is to win the first game of the first round, what the heck does that mean? Is that just a cliche, or how is that harder than winning in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, and Final Four?
Well, they asked Dawkins a good question this morning. I got up with my kid to watch the top 10 plays, and as I always do, and Mike Golick was on, and he asked that question to Golick. I mean, to the coaches, but he asked it to Danny, who played. He says, you know, what happens when you come there, you know? And he said they played Robert Morris one year, and he said, I went to a camp at Robert Morris. I didn't know they had a team. You know, unfortunately, it's better now because of TV and you lovely media and the incredible social media that tells everybody everything. It's so much more enlightening now than it used to be. But the truth of it is, I mean, players are players. They're no different than when you guys were young and when I was young, and it'll probably never change, you know. When you hear Duke and Carolina and Kentucky, there's one thing. When you hear teams down here, there's another. In some ways, I think there's an advantage to playing Valpo. Our guys know about Valpo. They know they've been a good program. But I think that's normal. And when people try to downplay that, I think that's coach speak too, you know. I mean, I think it is a factor. And that's what I think makes the game so hard. If you don't totally respect your opponents, then you better be damn talented yourself. And I don't know if any of us are as talented as that anymore, just the way the parity's gone.
Tom, can you talk a little bit about what Detroit and the Detroit area has meant to your program over the last 15 years? I mean, obviously one of the things you started, your first stateside game was there too, and there's a lot of history and a lot of ties there.
Well, I always think of Steve Smith when I think of that. My first recruit, you know, as a assistant when I was working for Judd. That was my goal, you know, when I was a GA here and I saw so many great players either leaving or going to other schools, you know, that was one of the things that I wanted to try to do as an assistant, and did a decent job. And when I got to be a head coach, it was really important to try to put a fence around your own state. And there were so many players in Detroit and Flint and Saginaw. And then, you know, as we got some good players there, but the Final Four in Detroit, or the game, the regionals in Detroit was maybe the one time in my career I felt like, wow, we've arrived, you know, and that was in 2000 when we played Syracuse and Iowa State. And just the support, I laugh to this day, but I remember riding by gas stations that had things on there, and I just hadn't seen that in our state much for Michigan State basketball, so that was big. And the Final Four was just a setting of all settings. You know, the Kentucky game down there was fun and everything, but the Final Four and the way the whole state embraced us, and Detroit, I still remember all the police officers asking if they could come to practice, and, you know, I had a whole section of closed practice. It was just police officers from Detroit. Turned out that made our guys a little nervous, but other than that, it was awesome, you know. And I you know, I have been appreciative of, you know, I think they embody what I believe in, you know, blue collar, hardworking, factory type place that I can't think of a better place to have this at for us, as far as that first round, and to think that us in Michigan are going to be there for the state of Michigan. Hopefully they'll embrace it like I think they will. It's another way to put our best foot forward as a city, and hopefully, you know, keep building on what we're trying to do down there, and as things get things straightened out in the way they should be.
Tom, you played in some games at the Palace since 2000, but when you walk back in there on Wednesday, it's an NCAA setting. It'll be set up like that again. How many memories will become flooding back for you from Syracuse and Iowa State?
Well, it's hard to say until you walk in there, but I know for Charlie and Mateen last night, you know, that's all they could talk about. And I definitely have told many of you that it's still, for me, I mean, that weekend was better than the Final Four, the national championship, to me, just because there were so many different things, you know, being embraced by our own state, getting to do it. The Pistons were so good back then. There were just so many reasons that were kind of cool. Our families, 90% of our team was from this state, and So that will end the games, the way the games went. We didn't play great in either game, especially early. We're down both games at halftime, and they were just those exciting comebacks, and it was scripted for Hollywood, in a way. And I still remember, winning that thing, and who was there? Oh, Cedric Irvin and Plex. And I remember Mateen throwing that ball into the stands, and thank God he threw it to two guys that could catch. And it made me realize Mateen probably could still play a little football, because that was a pretty long throw. But you kind of remember all those things, and they were great memories. Unfortunately, they're only memories. They don't help us win this game. They just help me feel good. Believe it or not, Gary Harris was 5 years old then. And it's so I don't know if the players remembered as much as the coach do, but for me, those will be memories they'll never leave me, because those are one of the top 2 or 3 moments in my coaching career here.
Tom, scoring droughts have been kind of a persistent problem for you guys. Have you diagnosed consistent issues during those droughts, and what do you think those are that you need to improve on?
Well, I think some of it's been turnovers sometimes. I think some of it's been our lack of getting the ball inside and then out. We go in there, then we don't go in there. And some of it's been, I think, Gary's up and down a little bit lately of, just because of some injuries and that. So I think there's been a combination of reasons, but none that I can really put my foot on to say we got to correct this. We just got to. The turnover one would be the big one, It seems like turnovers come in threes sometimes, and we just got to make sure that if we turn it over once, we don't start out like Iowa. We have one, then all of a sudden we have 3 in a row. Shot selection wouldn't be one of them to me. I mean, I'm sure we've taken some bad shots here or there, but not a ton of bad shots. That's one thing I've been impressed with this team. They don't do that.
Tom, do you remain convinced that this team still hasn't played its best basketball, and what is the potential for finding that next gear in this short span, or are you just going to continue to grind it out in the gear you're in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I am definitely convinced this team hasn't played their best collective basketball. Definitely believe that, and I think against Michigan and a couple of those games we played it on maybe one end of the court, but I just think that now that Payne is playing better, and I think we've got Appling back on track where he's pushing the ball and doing some things there, and Harris I think will play well, and Nix comes off a 17-9 day. I think there's the potential for that, but we probably aren't flicking the switch and making it something completely different. I mean, we've been a team that's had to grind it out, although when I listen to other coaches talk, it's so funny to hear what each fan base thinks. Everybody has the same ideas, and every coach is thinking the same thing. We're talking about wins and losses or skids you go through. I mean, we talk how well Kansas is playing, and they lost to TCU. It might be the biggest loss. They lost 3 in a row at one time, I think, and Louisville definitely did. And it's just, everybody's had their blowouts. Nobody's scoring's been down, across the country. I don't know. Maybe they're learning to play like the Big Ten. Who knows?
Tom, one thing that's different from 2000 with the pod system, rivals can play in the same place. Do you think it'll be kind of neat that your fans will be, rooting for North Dakota State, and Michigan fans will probably be rooting for Valpo?
Really, I'm kind of, I get torn as always. I gotta always, pull against my rival, I guess, if that's the way it works. But this is one of those years again too. I am pulling for the Big Ten a lot. I really am. So I hope everybody worries more about their team, and they got to have fun doing that. Someone's got to boo against us, or we got to do that against them. I guess they have the right to do that. But right now, I think what our conference has done is going to help all of us in recruiting too. I think it's going to help our conference. I think right now the more people we can get to keep advancing, the better it's going to be. So it is unique. I don't remember this happening except in the Final Four with Illinois, and it was just the opposite. I think our fans were awesome to them, and their fans were awesome to us. I'm not expecting the same, and understand why. And it's a little earlier in the tournament, but it will be unique since I haven't really. The pod system has brought that a little bit.
Yeah, yesterday, Coach, you mentioned 90% of going to the Palace was good, but you said there was that other 10%.
Yeah.
With the families there, friends, distractions, how do you manage that as far as how much time the kids get away, and is that, how big of a concern really is that for you?
Well, I always have to throw my social media into most conversations. So yesterday I was on a radio show with John Thompson and Bill Raftery, who I think's doing our game. And I mentioned to John Thompson that I often talk about how he did things, and sequestering his team. And, I think it was the championship game at Kentucky, they were almost late because they stayed in Louisville and instead of in Lexington. And I kind of admired some things about it. So I told him, I says, but I'll tell you what, with the new social media, you can't hide and sequester them as much. And I was trying to make a joke. I was trying to be serious. I didn't get the last word out of my mouth. And he said, "You want to bet?" God, I was scared standing on the other end of the phone, for God's sakes. And so I said, no, sorry, I don't want to bet. But there are those distractions, and they do happen, and it is a little different, He used to be able to take guys, put them in a hotel, girlfriends, families, this and that, I mean, now we got two-hand texters and tweeters, we got the double barrel, we were able to do both at one time, and still, so it just really is a situation where you don't get to do that as much. You got to rely on your guys, and you got to talk to them about it. And I gave them the lecture last night, and I'll give it to them again tonight and tomorrow. But it is one thing. They will be around the hotel. They will be in the area. That is. If there's a negative, that's the negative, but I think the positives will outweigh the negatives.
A year ago, Keith, shot was not falling. A lot of talk about, he's key going to the tournament. It's always the point guard, right, going to the tournament.
Yes.
Now the shot's falling. Maybe the floor game was against Ohio State. Got called out a little bit yesterday. Where do you think he is? How important is he going to be?
Well, he's going to get called out more and more because, he's a year older, and you're right. I mean, the point guard, the quarterback, is always going to be the one. If you win, it would have been because of his shooting. If you lose, it's because his floor game. If you can't, you got to find a reason, and that includes us. I mean, that's not a knock to anybody. It's that's part of it. And just like as a coach, I hear so many things that I wish I could. I wish I could let some of the people, not you guys, at least you're here, but some of the people that call or write or email, I mean, they must have just got done coaching the Lakers because they got every answer to every problem. And Keith's got to be careful of that, He's just got to deal with it. And I think I used the word last night to my team, and maybe this sums up what I think about modern day sports and how you better trust us. You better trust the people in this room. I gave them the old, heaven forbid anybody's parents got cancer, you better get them to somebody that knows what they're doing, not someone that's talking it. If somebody has a heart attack, you better get them someplace where they're going to get treated and fixed. Why would you go to somebody on the street? But this day and age, pretty soon we'll be tweeting how to fix a heart attack, and you can do it at home. I don't know. That's the way it is, and it's not funny because it's just the way our poor kids are brought up. So my thing last night is trust the people in this room, trust the coaches, trust your players, and in all honesty, don't trust anybody else right now for this 1, 2, or 3 weeks, because everybody gets emotional. Parents get emotional. Girlfriends get emotional. Buddies get emotional. Everybody gets emotional at this time and's got all the answers. I mean, you could watch 65 different shows and there's 72 different answers. Some guys are given 2, and that's just the way it is. And I think that's part of our job now, is making sure that they focus in the best they can at the task at hand and don't worry about all the other things. Easier said than done. But that'll be what I'll preach every night after every practice, and try to keep them here more than normal, just to stay away from all the things people are telling them, good, bad, or indifferent. And Keith Appling is going to have to deal with the position he plays. Trey Burke's going to have to deal with the position he plays. The guy at Duke, everybody's going to be in the same boat on that. I mean, everybody's got to have answers and questions for the quarterback, including the coaches, and that's just part of what you sign up for.
You think the shots he hit and some of those plays?
Yeah, I think it helped him. I mean, I think he's human, and he looked very comfortable shooting the ball, and he worked on it extremely hard the last couple of weeks, and so I think that's another thing I brought up. Who's worked the hardest on this? Who's worked the hardest on that? Derek, have you worked as hard on your free throws? It's dropped a little bit. John, have you worked as hard on, whatever, whoever it is. And it's fun to see a guy work a little harder at something and have some success. But sure, he feels better. I mean, that's what it's all about. In this day and age, I think confidence is important because I think they're getting ripped by so many people and they're getting access to it so easy that it is an issue. It's an issue that we all got to deal with. Oh, man. That was the first time I went as a fan. The last time was probably '82 when I went to a Final Four. I never really went to any other tournaments. It's a little hard to get there from where I was. Plus, we didn't find out. It took a couple extra days, so by the time we found out, and there were no flights. We don't have planes up there, so we had a lot of different issues that you had to deal with. But honestly, the last time I went to the Final Four in '79 was my first one, and then I think I went to a couple in those '80s. I do think I did that, but the first one was when I was the biggest fan, just because Michigan State was in it, even though I didn't know what that would bring later on. And I sat about 6 rows up with my head coach's second ticket, and now I'd be sitting 6 rows from the outside. And so it was a little different, but it was, I'm not sure I want to go as a fan right now. I've done a little TV in the off things and that, but once you're with your team, I think you're just so looking forward to playing longer. When you get done playing, you almost don't want to go to the games. That's for down the road 10 years, and I can go and enjoy them, or that was before I started. And other than that, now everything is, you look at it a little differently. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Were you buy the idea that on paper, going into this tournament, this might be your best chance to win the thing since maybe even '01? I mean, when you think about '05, there was Illinois and Carolina out there. '09, there was Carolina out there. Kansas was in your way in 10. Going into the tournament, before anything happens, that this could be your best chance in a long time?
I thought actually Louisville was the team in 10 because Kansas was good, but they were a 3 seed, right?
Kansas was the one in front of you guys in 10, but they got knocked out by Northern Iowa.
Oh, that was in 10. I'm thinking 9, yeah. Oh, yeah, yes. Seems like we're always playing the number one, or somewhere in our bracket is the number. I thought our best chance to win it of all of them was in 10, but not at the beginning. When we got there, I thought it was the best, even though we were beat up. I just didn't think it was as good a one. One of the rare times, in fact. But, boy, I don't know how I can look at the teams that I see in our bracket alone and feel you have a good chance, but I'm not sure I felt that way when we did play Kansas and Louisville. I'm not sure I felt that way when we played Duke and Kentucky. What I want to do is win this weekend, and if we win this weekend, then I think we have just as good a chance as anybody, even though the competition gets tougher, because we've been through it, we've been there, we know what we're doing as a staff. And I think that it becomes a coin flip, and it becomes matchups. I believe that all along. Be good enough to get to the Sweet 16, then be lucky enough to move on, and lucky and good. But I don't know. I've never really looked at it like you're asking me. I just look at those first 2 games, the last 10 years. Before that, I just looked at the first game and said, please let us get in, and please let us win a game. That's changed a little bit, but I really didn't look at the bracket all the way. If you listen to any of the people that I got a chance to listen to in the wee hours of the morning just before I went to bed, this is by far the toughest region. I mean, I don't think anybody's disputed that I've heard. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know. I really didn't look at any other one either. I didn't look at the West. I knew Gonzaga and Ohio State were up there, but I didn't look at all the in-betweens, and I don't know as much about them. I don't know as much about Arizona. Everybody tells me New Mexico is really good. I really don't know that. I haven't seen that.